My father looked straight at me and said, "We spent your savings on someone better." No hesitation, no blink, just the truth. He thought I was too weak to question. The room tightened around me, the clink of Lucas's fork, my mother's fake cough, the low hum of the dining light. For a second, I wasn't sure if my own pulse or the silence was louder. I finally asked, "Better than me?" That's when Grandfather Arthur slowly stood, his face turning hard. The kind of hard that means something is about to break. Name that someone now. But the real betrayal didn't start at that table. And it didn't end there either. My name is Eleanor. And for most of my life, I thought staying quiet made things easier. I grew up in a house where silence kept the peace and noise invited trouble. So I learned early to fold myself small to take up as little space as possible. I was the kid who packed her own lunch, who walked herself to school, who learned not to ask for anything because someone else always needed more. That someone was my younger brother Lucas. People always said he had potential, like it was something he breathed out naturally, something the rest of us were supposed to orbit around. Mom and Dad fed that idea with everything they had. Praise, attention, money, pride. By the time we were teenagers, the favoritism wasn't subtle anymore. It was a system, and I was the one expected to understand why it made sense. I remember birthdays where Lucas got bikes, gadgets, new sneakers from the mall. I got things like, "You're a practical sweetie. You don't need much." And a slice of cake that tasted like obligation. I remember school award nights, too, when I won something small: attendance, a writing contest, a science project ribbon, and Mom would clap politely while Dad whispered something about how Lucas's time would come. I believed them. I really did. When I was 16, I started working part-time after school. A little office filing job, later a weekend cafe shift. I saved every dollar. It wasn't much at first, but it grew slowly, steadily, like something solid I could rely on. Dad told me he'd help me put it in a savings account for my future. I trusted him. I thought that was what families did, protect each other's hard work. By the time I was 23 and working full-time as a junior admin in the city, that savings account was supposed to be my safety net. Not for anything dramatic, just rent stability. Maybe a used car one day, something that proved I had built a life on my own terms. And I really did try to build one. I rented a small apartment in the city, the kind with thin walls and a view of a parking lot. But it was mine. I decorated it with thrift store frames, kept a plant on the windowsill I always forgot to water, and learned the rhythm of the street outside. My life was humble, but it was stable. Still, every other weekend, I drove back to my parents' house. I told myself it was duty, but really it was Arthur. He lived a few hours away, but visited often, and he always made sure to be there when I was. He never said outright that he saw the imbalance in our family, but he didn't have to. His questions were gentle, but sharp in the right places. "You holding up all right, kid, or they treating you fair?" I'd always smile and say, "Yes." I didn't know then that he already suspected the truth. I hadn't dared to imagine. I didn't notice the first warning sign right away. It was a Wednesday evening after work, the kind of night when the city feels tired and the train air smells like rain and metal. I got home, kicked off my shoes, heated leftover pasta, and opened my laptop to check my account like I always did at the end of the month. The number didn't make sense. I blinked, refreshed. The page checked, the Wi-Fi refreshed again. The amount wasn't low. It was nearly empty. For a few seconds, I sat completely still. The fork paused halfway to my mouth. I felt that old instinct stirring. Don't panic yet. Don't assume the worst. But then I saw the recent activity payments, transfers, withdrawals I didn't recognize. Not one or two. A string of them. All quiet, spaced out, just subtle enough that someone must have hoped I wouldn't look too closely. Someone who knew I rarely complained. The next day at my parents' house, I tried to stay normal. Mom was chopping vegetables, humming to herself. Lucas sprawled on the couch with a new laptop glowing in his lap. New, sleek, expensive. Not the kind of thing he usually had unless someone splurged. Nice laptop, I said carefully. He didn't even look up. Yeah. Dad said it was time I had something decent for class. My chest tightened. Class? You're taking classes now? Yeah. Some extra programs, gear, supplies. They said it's an investment. He shrugged, tapping the keyboard like it was owed to him. You know how it is. I did know too well. Mom slid carrots into a pot. Eleanor, be supportive. He's at an important age. You remember how you were back then? I worked after school, I said quietly. She waved the thought away. That was your choice. And you turned out fine. It wasn't the words themselves that broke something in me, just the tone. The expectation that I'd swallow everything again. Later that evening, when Mom went upstairs and Lucas disappeared to play games, Dad walked into the kitchen. He opened a drawer, rummaged for something, then shut it with a careless thud. I watched him searching his face for something familiar. Dad, I said, can we talk about my savings account? He didn't flinch. What about it? There's money missing. A lot of it. Still no blink. We used it. My breath caught. Used it for what? For your brother, he said, matter of fact. He needs chances. Opportunities, things you didn't. I stared at him. I didn't need opportunities. You're already working, he replied. You're stable. You're fine. Lucas's future needs more support. The way he said it, cold, logical, like he was explaining weather patterns, made something deep inside me shift. My whole life, I'd stretched myself thin to avoid being a burden. And here he was telling me that made me less deserving. I don't remember what I said next. Maybe nothing. Silence was the only armor I had left. But later that night, while they all slept, I checked the drawer Dad had opened earlier. Inside, under a stack of old takeout menus, was a folder. A folder with my name on it. Inside were forms, paperwork, preparing to open a small loan under my identity. My hand shook, but not from fear anymore. Something sharper had taken its place. This wasn't an accident. This was a plan. And it was the moment I stopped being afraid. I barely slept that night. I lay awake in my small apartment, listening to the heater click on and off, replaying every moment in my mind. The empty account, Lucas's new laptop, Dad's calm confession, the paperwork hidden in that drawer with my name printed across the top. By morning, something inside me felt different. The fear was still there, but it had changed shape. It wasn't paralyzing anymore. It was sharp, focused. I drove to work as if on autopilot, the city passing in muted colors while my thoughts stitched themselves into a plan. During lunch, I met my friend Sophie at the cafe near the office. She took one look at me and frowned. You look like you haven't blinked in 12 hours. I told her everything quietly, carefully, the way someone unwraps an old wound. Her eyes widened. Ellie, that's not just messed up. That's illegal. I know, I whispered, but they think I won't do anything. Are they right? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The silence told both of us the truth. Not anymore. When work ended, I drove to Arthur's house. He lived in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of the city, the kind with tall trees and front porches that creaked in the wind. He opened the door before I could even knock fully, his eyes narrowing at the look on my face. What happened? We sat in his living room, the smell of old books and pine filling the air. I laid everything out, the missing savings, Dad's words, the loan paperwork. He listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening more with each detail. Finally, he exhaled. I knew they favored Lucas, but... This, he shook his head. This is taking advantage of you, Eleanor. They're counting on you staying quiet like you always have. I can't let this go. No, he agreed. You can't. We spent the next hour going through the statements I'd printed, the payments. I didn't make the dates, the withdrawals. Arthur moved slower than he used to, but his mind was still sharp. You need to document everything. Every transfer, every missing dollar, keep copies somewhere safe. I already started, I said. He gave a small, proud nod. Good. As I packed the papers, he touched my arm. A family that loves you doesn't use you as a resource. They don't drain you dry and tell you to smile. You don't deserve this. The words hit harder than I expected. I had spent my whole life trying not to be a burden. I never imagined my parents would turn me into a source. When I drove home that night, the city lights looked different. Less like stars, more like signals. I sat at my kitchen table, spread out the statements, the payments, the bills, the folder with my name. Then I organized everything into a clean, quiet pile, not for confrontation yet. For the moment, Dad would least expect, and I knew exactly when that moment would be. My parents liked to host family dinners whenever Arthur visited. They said it made the house feel warm, but it always felt staged, like they were performing a version of family we didn't actually live in. When Arthur called to say he'd be in town that weekend, Mom immediately planned one. She asked me to come early. I didn't. I arrived exactly on time, a folder tucked inside my bag, my heartbeat steady in a way it hadn't been in weeks. The moment I stepped into the living room, I knew something was off. Mom moved around too quickly, touching napkins, adjusting plates that didn't need adjusting. Lucas was sulking in a corner, scrolling on his phone like he was trying to disappear into it. Dad, calm as always, stood near the kitchen doorway, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. Arthur sat at the dining table, cane resting beside his chair, eyes sharper than ever. When he looked at me, something in my chest steadied. Dinner started normally, too normally. Small talk, clinking silverware, the smell of roasted chicken, mixing with the faint citrus cleaner Mom always used, but the air felt stretched thin enough to tear. Dad cut into his food and glanced at me. Heard work's keeping you busy. Yeah, I said. It's been steady, Mom added. We're proud of how independent you are. Not everyone your age manages that. I almost laughed. The irony sat bitter on my tongue. Then Dad said it just like that. No pause, no warning. We spent your savings on someone better. The room collapsed into silence. The kind that doesn't echo, just presses down. I felt Arthur's gaze move from me to Dad, slow and heavy. Lucas froze mid-chew. Mom set her fork down too fast, the metal clattering against her plate. I swallowed once. Better than me. Dad didn't blink. Your brother needed support. You didn't. It's simple. Simple. A word like that should never be used to justify betrayal. I didn't look away. That money was mine. All of it. I worked for it. You'll be fine, he said, brushing the air as if shooing away a fly. You're responsible. Strong. No one needs more guidance. Arthur pushed back his chair, then an abrupt scraping sound that cut straight through the room. He stood slowly, but with a presence that filled every corner. Name that someone, he said, voice low, steady. Now. Dad opened his mouth, but whatever came out wasn't confidence. It was panic disguised as irritation. Dad, this isn't your business. We handled things the way we saw fit. That's clear, Arthur said. Too clear. His gaze flicked to me. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. My hands didn't shake this time. Every page felt like an anchor, not a burden. I brought something, I said. Dad's jaw tightened. Eleanor. I laid the papers on the table. Statements, withdrawals, payments, bills, dates lined up like a confession. The last page, the loan paperwork sat on top. Mom's breath. Caught. Where did you get all that? It was in your drawer, I said calmly. The one you thought I'd never check. Lucas leaned forward, confusion spreading across his face. Wait, this came from her account. Dad snapped. You needed those classes. Don't start acting ungrateful. I didn't ask you to take her money, Lucas shot back, the first real crack in his voice. Why would you even? Because you deserved it, Dad said sharply. Eleanor doesn't need expensive things. She doesn't need the same opportunities. She manages on her own. She always has. Arthur slammed his palm on the table, not hard, but with enough force to silence every voice instantly. That does not make her less deserving, he said. It makes her exploited. Dad's face flushed. Dad, you don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly. Arthur's voice was ice. You took her savings without asking. You tried to open a loan under her name. You put her future at risk so you could keep pretending Lucas is helpless. Mom whispered. We were trying to support him. At her expense, Arthur asked, turning his eyes back to me. Eleanor, speak plainly. What do you want to happen now? It was the first time anyone in that house had ever asked me that. I breathed in slowly. I want my savings returned. Every dollar. And I want the loan paperwork destroyed by your hands, not mine. Dad shook his head. You're overreacting. You have a job. You'll replace Arthur, cut in. She won't replace what you stole. You will. Dad's expression shifted. Anger first, then fear. Real flickering fear. Mom's voice trembled. We don't have that kind of then you'll adjust. Arthur said, sell something. Cut back. Figure it out. Because if Eleanor files this as a financial abuse report, the consequences will be significant. A long silence followed. Heavy, unavoidable. Finally, Lucas spoke, voice quiet. Eleanor, I'm sorry. I didn't know. It didn't fix anything, but it mattered that he said it. Dad sank into his chair like the air had been punched out of him. Fine, he said through clenched teeth. We'll return it. All of it. And the loan? I asked, he swallowed. I'll shred it tonight. Arthur nodded once, satisfied. Good. Then this family might still have a chance. But I knew better. Some damage doesn't undo. It just becomes a line you never cross again. I stood gathering my folder. I'm going home. No one tried to stop me. For the first time in my life, leaving didn't feel like running away. It felt like stepping into the life I finally chose. The next few weeks moved quietly, almost strangely, so like the aftermath of a long storm. My parents returned the money in small, tense installments, more than they ever thought they'd have to explain. Each transfer arrived with no message attached, no apology, no acknowledgement, just numbers moving from one account to another, undoing a betrayal they never should have committed. Arthur checked in often. Sometimes he called, sometimes he dropped by my apartment with groceries I didn't need, but accepted anyway. He never lectured me, never pushed. He just made sure I knew I wasn't walking through the wreckage alone. Lucas kept his distance at first. Then one afternoon, he showed up at my door, hands shoved deep into his pockets. He didn't try to justify anything. He just said, "I'm trying to do better." And for the first time, I believed him. Life in my apartment felt different now, lighter. I organized my files, built a new budget, and took small steps toward the future I thought I'd lost. I wasn't scared anymore. What happened at that dinner didn't fix my family. It didn't erase years of silence, but it gave me something I never had before. A boundary they finally had to see. I still visit my parents sometimes, but things aren't the same. And maybe they're not supposed to be. A boundary isn't a wall. It's a line that reminds you where you end. For the first time in my life, they finally stopped crossing mine. I'm building a future on my own terms now. One they don't get to rewrite or borrow from. And if you've ever had to stand up to the people who were meant to protect you, I hope you know this. You're not wrong for wanting respect. You're not alone. If this story speaks to you, share your thoughts below and hit subscribe for